Society. Today, I will be talking to you about The Cask of Amontillado by none other than the esteemed Edgar Allan Poe. See, this story was set in the late 18th, probably early 19th century, and the main character is Montresor, a rich aristocrat who owns a large chain of catacombs due to his family's bloody history, contributing to the Gothic atmosphere of death. Very cheery, isn't it? The victim is his colleague, Fortunato, which ironically means lucky in Latin, or fortunate, a fellow wealthy aristocrat and a connoisseur in wines. I chose this story because, obviously, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed Montresor's intelligence in baiting Fortunato to his untimely death. The element of mystery is very compelling as you do not figure out what Fortunato really did to anger Montresor so much to drive him to murder. Fortunato's interest in the Cask of Amontillado, a brand of Spanish sherry, which is very rare apparently, was his fatal temptation, and the irony with his name and his predicament is entertaining. In the catacombs, there were many opportunities for Fortunato to retreat and save his life, as you will soon find out when I read the extract, but he pushed on voluntarily and walked to his death. Edgar Allan Poe has always been an idol of mine in the literary world, as I would also like to become a writer. Language and techniques. In the story, Poe uses sophisticated and heightened language and complex sentences, which are aimed at an audience of adults or matured adolescents as they need to decipher his meaning. There's a sentence in the story that goes, "A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser," meaning, basically, a wrong is made right by revenge on the wrongdoer. Isn't that much simpler? Well, everyone's a critic, isn't it? And most of the dialogue he uses is short and to the point to push the story onwards, which is a great contrast to the complex sentences and the rest of the story. It's eloquently written with long, twisting sentences to deceive the reader into believing that Montresor has a justified reason for taking another's life, especially one that's supposed to be his friend. However, in the end, we do realize that Montresor is mentally disturbed, even a little mentally insane, when he blames his heart sickness on the dampness of the catacombs, completely ignoring the reality of his deadly sin. He even mocks his colleague's death by announcing, almost with reverence, "In pace requiescat." I do not have the Italian accent, I apologize. It means rest in peace. The Gothic tropes that Edgar uses, well, there are tons. There's a dark, dank, and a very damp killing chamber, very enclosed under a fort or a castle. And Montresor uses a torch, so fire, flames, as the source of light to lead Fortunato to his death. And there are human corpses buried in the walls, and that which contributes to that atmosphere of mystery and death, and which all contributes to the fact that it's horror fiction, and that it's an unsolved crime by officials, even though Montresor clearly confessed it. It has a theme of revenge and violence. It involves murder and high level of emotions, which is Montresor's motive for revenge. And insanity, my favorite, disguised by careful planning and sophisticated behavior. Watch out who your friends are. An abandoned female, Mrs. Fortunato, which is maybe the female in distress, indirectly. And as for the extract that I will read you, I shall read parts from the beginning and parts from the end, as I do not want to spoil too much. Here, in the beginning, this describes half of what Montresor wished to do. "The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon result, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who was done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For most part their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him materially. I was skilful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk, one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his head. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado? I have my doubts." "Amontillado? And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado. As you are engaged, I am on my way to Luchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, 'Luchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry.' And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Luchesi—" "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." And that's the beginning. That's the first page. And so basically, Montressor has baited Fortunato with the promise of a rare Spanish sherry. And Fortunato would feel insulted if he weren't called upon to judge whether it's real or not. Here is his death. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labours and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope about it with a recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs, and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamoured. I re-echoed, I aided, I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamourer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came out from the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. the voice said. Ha ha! Hee hee, a very, very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, ha ha, over our wine. The Amontillado, I said. Ha, yes, the Amontillado, but is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor. Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato? No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick, on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry I re-erected the old rampart of the bones. For half of a century no mortal has disturbed them. In pace resquiat. Well, I hope you enjoyed this reading and my Gothic trope analysis. If you're interested in more Edgar Allan Poe, search it on the web. There are tons of PDF files to download it. This one I just, took it from the internet. Well, thank you for listening. Good night.